The sun was barely rising, yet the streets were already alive with the noise of another restless morning. Jeepneys roared past, vendors shouted over one another, and people hurried along the sidewalks with faces that carried yesterday's exhaustion. Manila didn't wait for anyone, especially not the forgotten souls who slept on its corners. Beside a rusted lamp post, a thin man with tangled hair and a torn jacket sat quietly on the cold pavement. His face was lined with hardship, the kind that comes from years of being invisible. He held no sign, made no plea, and didn't chase anyone. He simply sat with a worn paper cup in front of him, hoping someone might see him, truly see him, for even just a moment. Most didn't. People walked around him without looking down, as if stepping near him might stain their morning. Some covered their noses. Others whispered insults under their breath, forgetting that he could still hear, still feel, still break. But the man didn't react. He kept his gaze low, his hands folded, his breathing slow, like someone who had learned to endure disappointment without expecting anything else. Then, something changed. The air shifted, the crowd murmured, and a man approached, walking with an energy different from everyone else around. Calm, steady, grounded. No entourage. No cameras. No flashy clothes. Just a simple jacket, a quiet presence, and eyes that carried both strength and humility. It was Manny Pacquiao. Some people recognized him instantly. A few froze. Others moved aside in awe. Even those who weren't fans knew the face, one of the most respected fighters, one of the world's toughest men, walking through the street without a single guard. The homeless man didn't notice him at first. He was too lost in thought, too used to being unseen. But Manny noticed him. He didn't walk past. He didn't speed up. His steps slowed, his eyes softened, and he approached the man the same way he would approach anyone, with dignity. For a moment, the homeless man still didn't look up. He assumed it was just another passerby. Another shadow in the crowd. Another morning of pretending not to hear the cruel whispers around him. But then he felt the presence stop in front of him. He raised his head slowly, cautiously, and for the first time in a long time, someone looked directly into his eyes without judgment. Manny offered a gentle nod. The man's lips trembled. He hadn't spoken to anyone all morning. His voice had grown weak from hunger and silence. But he gathered the last pieces of courage he had left, swallowed, and whispered in a voice almost too soft to hear. "Sir, can you spare just $2? The crowd stiffened. People nearby exchanged looks. Some snickered. Others rolled their eyes. A few even pulled out their phones, not to help, but to record the moment they assumed would be embarrassing. A homeless man asking Manny Pacquiao for money? They expected Manny to ignore him. They expected him to walk away. They expected him to be annoyed. After all, famous people don't stop. Not for someone like him. But Manny didn't move. He didn't flinch. He didn't look irritated. He didn't pretend not to hear. Instead, he stood completely still. You could feel the tension in the air deepen. Even the nearby vendors paused their shouting. The sounds of the street faded into a strange, heavy silence. The homeless man looked down again, ashamed. He regretted asking. He regretted hoping. He regretted believing someone might care. But then, Manny slowly bent down, closer, closer, until he was at the man's eye level. And at that moment, every single person watching felt something shift inside them. Because what Manny Pacquiao did next would leave the entire street stunned, and change one man's life forever. The morning heat had just begun to settle over downtown Manila, casting a warm glow across the crowded streets. Vendors were already in full swing, shouting deals over one another, stacking fruits, grilling skewers, filling the air with smoke and the smell of charcoal. Jeepneys rattled past with their bright colors and loud horns. Motorcycle engines revved, tricycles weaved between pedestrians, and the city moved with a pulse that never slowed, never waited, never softened. Yet among all the noise, there was a quiet corner everyone avoided. A worn piece of cardboard leaned against a cracked wall. Beside it sat the homeless man. He looked older than he truly was. Life had aged him more than time. His hair was uneven, tangled from nights spent on concrete. His jacket was thin, torn at the elbows, barely holding together. His shoes had holes at the toes, revealing skin darkened by dirt and pavement. But his eyes still carried something gentle, something human. Tired, yes. Exhausted, absolutely. But polite. Soft. Waiting. He held no sign today. No message begging for sympathy. Only a small paper cup, half crushed, resting in front of him. He didn't reach out to people. He didn't tap them for help. He didn't shout. He simply sat with his hands folded in his lap, as if the cup itself had grown embarrassed of asking for a few coins. People passed him quickly, pretending not to see. Some stepped around him with exaggerated disgust, tightening their bags or covering their noses. Street kids whispered as they passed. Office workers avoided eye contact with professional precision. A jeepney driver shook his head and muttered something cruel as he walked by. The man didn't react. He had learned long ago that every insult stung less when you expected nothing better. But fate has a strange way of putting extraordinary moments in ordinary places. The crowd parted, not because they wanted to, but because someone walked through them with a presence impossible to ignore. Not loud. Not flashy. Just undeniable. A man in simple clothes, a gray hoodie, worn jeans, running shoes, walked alone. No guards. No assistants. No fanfare. He moved with the easy confidence of someone who had survived the impossible and come out stronger. Someone who knew pain, discipline, hunger, and hope intimately. Manny Pacquiao. Even in his simplicity, his energy filled the space. Some people recognized him instantly and froze mid-step. Others nudged their friends. A few tourists fumbled for their phones. But Manny didn't react to the attention. His steps were calm, steady, humble, like a man moving through his own hometown instead of a global icon walking through chaos. As he approached the corner, the homeless man didn't notice him at first. He was focused on something else, a small piece of bread he had kept from the day before, trying to stretch it to survive. He broke it slowly, as if savoring each tiny piece would somehow make it enough. Manny's footsteps stopped. The homeless man sensed someone nearby, but he didn't look up. He had become used to people stopping only to make jokes, take pictures, or throw comments sharp enough to cut skin. But Manny didn't move away. He didn't walk past. He stood there, quietly observing the man in the same way he might observe a challenger entering the ring. Calm, focused, trying to understand his story before making a move. Finally, the homeless man gathered courage he wasn't sure he had. He lifted his head slowly, expecting the worst. He prepared a small speech, something apologetic, something that said he didn't mean to disturb anyone. But when he looked up, he didn't see annoyance. He didn't see disgust. He didn't see pity. He saw eyes that carried compassion. Eyes that knew hardship. Eyes that had slept on hard floors too, once upon a time. The man swallowed hard. His throat was dry, his voice barely functional, but desperation pushed through the weakness. He hesitated, fearing the reaction, then whispered, almost as if apologizing for asking. "Sir, could you spare $2? I just want to buy bread." People around them paused mid-stride. A few laughed quietly as if the question itself were ridiculous. A group of teenagers nudged each other and whispered, "Does he even know who he's asking?" An office worker smirked, expecting Manny to walk away. One man scoffed loudly and said, "He's Manny Pacquiao. Leave him alone." But Manny didn't flinch. The homeless man dropped his eyes again, regretting the question as soon as he asked. He knew what usually came next, a cold look, a dismissive wave, a silent walk away. He braced himself for the familiar sting of rejection. But something unusual was happening. Manny stepped closer. Closer than anyone expected. Close enough that the street noise seemed to fade away. The homeless man's breathing slowed. His hands trembled. He didn't know if he should apologize, or remain still, or take back his request. Manny didn't say a word yet. He didn't reach into his pocket. He didn't smile for the cameras. He didn't act like a celebrity at all. He simply stood there, looking at the man with a patience that felt almost unreal in such a busy, rushing world. The crowd wasn't just watching anymore. They were waiting. Waiting for the moment. Waiting for the reaction. waiting to see how one of the world's toughest champions would respond to a simple, desperate request from a forgotten man. And what Manny did next would soon echo through that street, like a quiet miracle. Before we continue, tell me where you're watching from. For a moment, the already busy street seemed to hold its breath. Manny's quiet stillness created a strange pocket of silence in the middle of all the chaos. A silence that made people look. A silence that made strangers pause. A silence that made the homeless man shrink a little inside, afraid of what would happen next. Then the reactions started. A man standing near a fruit stall let out a sharp laugh. "Seriously? $2, he said loudly, as if the request itself was a joke. "Why would he give you anything? He's Manny Pacquiao, not an ATM. A few young guys nearby joined in, snickering among themselves. One of them elbowed his friend and whispered, "Imagine being this clueless. Asking Manny Pacquiao for pocket money? Bro doesn't even know who he's talking to." Another man, dressed in a business shirt and carrying a briefcase, shook his head as he passed and muttered just loud enough to be heard, "He probably hears this 1,000 times a day. Get in line." The homeless man felt each comment hit like a slap. His shoulders tightened. His hands curled together. He lowered his eyes again, staring at the dirty pavement. He wished he hadn't asked. He wished he had stayed quiet. He wished he could disappear into the concrete beneath him. But Manny still didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He didn't reach into his pocket. He simply stood there, silent, still, studying the man in front of him. His gaze wasn't cold or judgmental. It was focused, observant, almost gentle, like someone looking beyond the worn jacket and tired face, into the story behind them. But the crowd didn't understand the silence. They interpreted it their own way. A woman holding a shopping bag folded her arms and said, "See? He's ignoring you. What did you think would happen?" Another man stepped closer, just to get a better view for the video he was recording. "Bro," he whispered to his phone, "watch this. Manny is about to walk away." The homeless man heard it. He heard all of it. And each voice pushed his hope further down into the ground. He took a shaky breath and tried to form words, maybe an apology, maybe a way to back out gracefully. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to bother." But his voice cracked. He couldn't finish. His throat tightened, and he stared at his trembling fingers. The world around him blurred. He didn't want to cry. Not here, not in front of strangers, not in front of someone he respected more than anyone. He braced himself for the familiar humiliation. The quiet dismissal. The polite but painful, "Sorry, I can't help you." Manny, however, didn't show any sign of leaving. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't step back. He didn't behave like someone desperate to escape an uncomfortable situation. He simply kept looking. Not at the man's clothes. Not at his cup. Not at his dirt-stained shoes. He looked at his eyes. And the longer Manny stood there, unmoving, the more confused the crowd became. A teenager laughed nervously. "Why isn't he saying anything? This is awkward." Another whispered, "Maybe he's annoyed. Maybe he doesn't want to explode on camera." Someone added loudly, "He'll walk away. Just wait. People like that always walk away." The homeless man believed it too, because history had taught him exactly that. His lips pressed together, and he slowly pulled his hands back from the cup as if to show he no longer expected anything. He nodded slightly, ashamed of daring to hope. "I understand, sir," he whispered. "You don't have to say anything. I shouldn't have asked." His voice was soft, too soft for most to hear, but Manny heard every syllable. Still, he said nothing. But his eyes changed. They sharpened. Not in anger. Not in irritation. But with a kind of focus that fighters carried into the ring, right before the first bell. That expression alone made the nearest bystanders fall silent. Even the ones who were laughing stopped suddenly, confused by the intensity in Manny's gaze. They weren't used to this version of him. The version that didn't entertain cameras. The version that didn't play along with expectations. The version that saw right through people. A vendor whispered to her colleague, Why is he looking at him like that? Her friend whispered back. I don't know, but something's about to happen. More people gathered, drawn by the strange tension in the air. Some lifted their phones. Some leaned closer. Some stood on tiptoes to see. The homeless man kept his head down, certain he had ruined his own day. He blinked hard, fighting the sting in his eyes. He hated being watched like this. He hated feeling powerless in front of strangers who didn't even know his name. But then, after what felt like an eternity, Manny took a slow breath. One step forward. Then another. His shadow fell across the man sitting on the pavement. The crowd leaned in closer. Phones rose higher. Voices dropped to whispers. The tension tightened like a string pulled to its limit. No one knew what he would say. No one knew what he would do. For a moment, the already busy street seemed to hold its breath. Manny's quiet stillness created a strange pocket of silence in the middle of all the chaos. A silence that made people look. A silence that made strangers pause. A silence that made the homeless man shrink a little inside, afraid of what would happen next. Then the reactions started. A man standing near a fruit stall let out a sharp laugh. Seriously? $2, he said loudly, as if the request itself was a joke. Why would he give you anything? He's Manny Pacquiao, not an ATM. A few young guys nearby joined in, snickering among themselves. One of them elbowed his friend and whispered, Imagine being this clueless. Asking Manny Pacquiao for pocket money? Bro doesn't even know who he's talking to. Another man, dressed in a business shirt and carrying a briefcase, shook his head as he passed and muttered just loud enough to be heard. He probably hears this 1,000 times a day. Get in line. The homeless man felt each comment hit like a slap. His shoulders tightened. His hands curled together. He lowered his eyes again, staring at the dirty pavement. He wished he hadn't asked. He wished he had stayed quiet. He wished he could disappear into the concrete beneath him. But Manny still didn't move. He didn't smile. He didn't frown. He didn't reach into his pocket. He simply stood there, silent, still, studying the man in front of him. His gaze wasn't cold or judgmental. It was focused, observant, almost gentle, like someone looking beyond the worn jacket and tired face, into the story behind them. But the crowd didn't understand the silence. They interpreted it their own way. A woman holding a shopping bag folded her arms and said, See? He's ignoring you. What did you think would happen? Another man stepped closer, just to get a better view for the video he was recording. Bro, he whispered to his phone, watch this. Manny is about to walk away. The homeless man heard it. He heard all of it. And each voice pushed his hope further down into the ground. He took a shaky breath and tried to form words, maybe an apology, maybe a way to back out gracefully. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean to bother. But his voice cracked. He couldn't finish. His throat tightened, and he stared at his trembling fingers. The world around him blurred. He didn't want to cry. Not here, not in front of strangers, not in front of someone he respected more than anyone. He braced himself for the familiar humiliation. The quiet dismissal. The polite but painful, sorry, I can't help you. Manny, however, didn't show any sign of leaving. He didn't shift his weight. He didn't step back. He didn't behave like someone desperate to escape an uncomfortable situation. He simply kept looking. Not at the man's clothes. Not at his cup. Not at his dirt-stained shoes. He looked at his eyes. And the longer Manny stood there, unmoving, the more confused the crowd became. A teenager laughed nervously. Why isn't he saying anything? This is awkward. Another whispered, maybe he's annoyed. Maybe he doesn't want to explode on camera. Someone added loudly, he'll walk away. Just wait. People like that always walk away. The homeless man believed it too, because history had taught him exactly that. His lips pressed together, and he slowly pulled his hands back from the cup as if to show he no longer expected anything. He nodded slightly, ashamed of daring to hope. I understand, sir, he whispered. You don't have to say anything. I shouldn't have asked. His voice was soft, too soft for most to hear, but Manny heard every syllable. Still, he said nothing. But his eyes changed. They sharpened. Not in anger. Not in irritation. But with a kind of focus that fighters carried into the ring, right before the first bell. That expression alone made the nearest bystanders fall silent. Even the ones who were laughing stopped suddenly, confused by the intensity in Manny's gaze. They weren't used to this version of him. The version that didn't entertain cameras. The version that didn't play along with expectations. The version that saw right through people. A vendor whispered to her colleague. "Why is he looking at him like that?" Her friend whispered back. "I don't know, but something's about to happen." More people gathered, drawn by the strange tension in the air. Some lifted their phones. Some leaned closer. Some stood on tiptoes to see. The homeless man kept his head down, certain he had ruined his own day. He blinked hard, fighting the sting in his eyes. He hated being watched like this. He hated feeling powerless in front of strangers who didn't even know his name. But then, after what felt like an eternity, Manny took a slow breath. One step forward. Then another. His shadow fell across the man sitting on the pavement. The crowd leaned in closer. Phones rose higher. Voices dropped to whispers. The tension tightened like a string pulled to its limit. No one knew what he would say. No one knew what he would do. No one could predict how the world's champion would respond to a simple $2 request. But everyone felt it. Something big was coming. Something none of them expected. And the homeless man braced himself for rejection, not knowing that Manny's next move would turn this moment into a story people would never forget. The moment Manny Pacquiao paused, the entire atmosphere shifted. What just moments ago was a noisy Manila street now suddenly felt still, like even the wind decided to stop and watch. People who had been walking briskly slowed down. Vendors paused mid-sentence. Jeepney horns faded into the background. One woman held her child's hand and whispered, "Is that Manny Pacquiao?" Another man lifted his phone slightly, unsure if filming would be disrespectful or unforgettable. The homeless man didn't lift his head. He stared at the ground, trembling, embarrassed by the attention now forming around him. He had asked for only $2, but suddenly it felt like he had asked for the world. Manny's shadow moved closer. The old man tightened his grip on his cardboard sign. His voice cracked as he tried to speak first. Sir, it's okay if you can't. I'm sorry for bothering." But Manny didn't let him finish. He took one slow step forward, then another, and then he did something that froze every single person in place. He bent down. Not just slightly. Not just leaning in. Manny Pacquiao knelt on the sidewalk right beside the homeless man. A ripple went through the crowd. Someone gasped, "No way." Another whispered, "Is he really kneeling?" Even the vendors behind their stalls stopped moving, mouths half open, disbelief etched across their faces. The homeless man looked terrified. He tried to shift away, thinking he was causing trouble. "Sir, please. You don't have to." Manny raised a gentle hand. Not a command. Not a warning. But a calm gesture that said, "It's okay. I'm here." He sat down beside the man. Right on the pavement. Right where the man lived most of his days. People couldn't believe what they were seeing. A security guard watching from afar muttered, "This is Manny Pacquiao, and he's sitting on the ground with a homeless man?" Another woman wiped her eyes, whispering, "Only he would do something like this." Phones clicked open. Camera apps loaded. But even the people recording felt a strange silence inside themselves, like they were something more powerful than just a celebrity sighting. Manny didn't speak at first. He just sat there, shoulder to shoulder with the homeless man. The old man turned away, his voice cracking again. Sir. People are looking." Manny smiled softly, a warm, reassuring smile. "They're looking because you're worth being noticed." The homeless man blinked. That wasn't the answer he expected. No one had said something like that to him, maybe in years. Some people moved closer, but no one dared interrupt. It felt like watching a scene that would be remembered for decades. A young boy tugged his mother's sleeve. "Mom, why is Manny sitting on the ground?" She couldn't answer. All she could say was, "Because he's different." Still, Manny didn't reach for his wallet. He didn't hand over money. He didn't make a speech. Instead, he looked at the man with a steady gaze full of empathy, the kind of look that makes someone feel seen, truly seen, for the first time in a long time. The homeless man looked confused, worried, lost. "Sir, I just need bread," he whispered. $2 is enough." Manny's expression softened even more. He placed his hand gently on the man's shoulder. Not forcefully, not pitying, just human. "Tell me your name," Manny said quietly. The man hesitated. People like him weren't used to being asked for their names. Most people walked past as if they were part of the sidewalk. But Manny waited patiently. My name is Daniel," he finally said. The crowd felt the shift again, like something important had just begun. Manny nodded. "Daniel," he repeated with respect. "Thank you for telling me." A few people in the crowd swallowed hard. Some lowered their phones. Because this wasn't just a celebrity encounter anymore. This was dignity being returned to someone who had forgotten what it felt like. Daniel looked down at his trembling hands. No one asks for my name," he said, voice shaking. Manny exhaled slowly. "Then today is different." The tension hung in the air like a held breath. Everyone waited, everyone. Vendors, commuters, even strangers who had just stumbled upon the scene. They waited for what Manny would say next, for what he would do next. Because it was clear. He hadn't knelt without a reason. He hadn't sat beside Daniel without a purpose. There was something more coming. Everyone felt it. Even Daniel felt it. Manny raised his head, looked straight at the crowd, then back at the homeless man. And then, he reached into his pocket. Slowly, deliberately. The suspense tightened. What he was about to do, no one could predict. But whatever it was going to change everything. Manny's hand moved slowly inside his pocket, and the entire street waited in complete silence, so quiet that even the distant honking seemed to fade out. Daniel, the homeless man, kept his head lowered, expecting nothing more than the small amount he had requested. $2. Just enough for bread. Just enough to get through the next few hours. But Manny Pacquiao did not take out $2. He didn't even reach for a simple bill. Instead, he pulled out a thick, folded stack of crisp peso notes, wrapped with a small rubber band, something no one expected to see in that moment. Gasps broke through the crowd. Is he really going to give him all that? No way. Not all of it. Oh my God. But Manny didn't make a show of it. He didn't hold it high. He didn't announce it. He simply placed the entire stack gently into Daniel's shaking hands. Daniel froze. He looked at the money, then at Manny, then back at the money again, like his mind couldn't process what he was seeing. Sir, this is too much," he stammered. I only asked for $2. Manny smiled softly. A calm smile, full of warmth. "I know," he said. "But I'm giving you what you need, not what you asked for." The crowd felt the weight of those words. It wasn't charity. It wasn't pity. It was dignity. Before Daniel could protest again, Manny did something even more shocking. He stood up, turned toward a nearby bakery stall, and waved the vendor over. A young woman rushed forward. Manny spoke quietly, but the crowd still heard him. "Give him food. Not once. Not today. Every day this week. I'll take care of it." The vendor's eyes widened. "Sir, yes, of course." Gasps spread through the people watching. But Manny still wasn't done. He looked back at Daniel and said gently, "Come with me." Daniel hesitated, terrified of being a burden. "Sir, I don't want to trouble you. You've already given so much." Manny shook his head. "You're not trouble. You're a person." Those words hit harder than the money, harder than the food, harder than anything. Manny took Daniel's arm, not forcefully, but with respect, and helped him stand. The crowd stepped aside like a path forming naturally. They walked toward a small clothing stall nearby. The vendor there stared, shocked. Give him what he needs, Manny said. Shoes, a shirt, pants, everything. The vendor nodded quickly and began gathering clothes. Daniel whispered, voice breaking, "No one has ever bought me clothes." Manny rested a hand on his shoulder. "Then today is the first day of the rest of your life." People nearby felt their hearts tighten. A mother wiped away tears. A young man lowered his phone, suddenly feeling humbled. A taxi driver whispered, "This is why he's a legend." But the true twist, the moment that would be remembered, came next. As Daniel changed into clean clothes behind the stall, Manny stepped aside and pulled out his phone. Not to record. Not to take pictures. He made a call. A short call. Clear. Direct. When Daniel returned, wearing fresh clothes and looking almost like a new person, Manny placed both hands on his shoulders. "Daniel," he said gently, "I called someone who can help you." Daniel blinked. "Help me? With what?" Manny looked him straight in the eyes. "With work. With shelter. With getting your life back." Daniel's lips trembled. He tried to speak, but only a broken whisper came out. Why me?" Manny's reply was quiet, but carried across the entire street. "Because no one is invisible. Not while I'm here." The crowd fell into stunned silence. Some people cried. Some smiled. Some just watched, speechless. A car pulled up moments later. A man stepped out, an assistant from one of Manny's charitable foundations. He approached with respect. "Sir, Manny told me everything. We'll take care of you, Daniel." Daniel covered his face with both hands. His knees buckled, and Manny caught him before he fell. "It's okay," Manny said softly. "You're safe now." Daniel sobbed into his hands, not because of the money, not because of the food, but because, for the first time in years, someone had seen him as human. The crowd broke into quiet applause, not loud, not wild, just a soft, emotional sound that filled the air with compassion. And Manny, humble as ever, didn't bow, didn't wave, didn't pose. He simply turned to Daniel and said one line the entire crowd would never forget. "Eat first. Rest. Then tell me your story. We'll build the next chapter together." The street felt transformed. A place of noise had become a place of hope. A request for $2 had turned into a second chance at life. "Now I want to hear from you. Do you think Manny was right to stop everything for this man? Comment, right, if you believe kindness can change lives." Daniel stood there in the middle of the Manila street, the afternoon light spilling over his newly changed clothes, the warm bread in his hands, and the folded stack of money still pressed tightly against his chest. His breath trembled. His lips shook. And for the first time in years, he wasn't shaking from fear or hunger, but from overwhelming emotion. He wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve, still unable to believe what had just happened. People were watching him not with disgust, not with judgment, but with something he hadn't seen in a long time. Respect. Real, genuine respect. He swallowed hard. "Sir, I don't understand," he whispered, voice breaking. "Why would you stop for someone like me?" Manny turned to him, his face calm, his expression gentle. "There is no someone like you," Manny said softly. "There is only a person. A human being. Someone who deserves to be seen." Daniel's shoulders shook as he fought back another wave of tears. His hands clutched the bread so tightly the paper wrapper crinkled. "People usually walk past me. Like I'm not even real." Manny stepped closer, not towering over him, not looking down on him, but standing at his side, like an equal. "People walk fast," Manny said. "Life moves fast. Sometimes so fast they forget to look. Forget to care." He paused, letting the moment sink in. "But that doesn't mean you're invisible. You just crossed paths with someone who refuses to look away." Daniel exhaled shakily and nodded, tears falling freely now. "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to thank me," Manny replied. "Just eat well today. Rest. And when you get the chance, help someone else. Even if it's small. Even if it's just a smile." Those words struck deeper than money ever could. Behind them, the crowd remained absolutely silent. People who had initially mocked Daniel or ignored him now stood with lowered heads. The same voices that laughed earlier were now quiet, thoughtful, humbled. One of the vendors whispered gently, "Sir Manny, you changed the whole street today." Manny gave a small smile, but didn't answer. His focus stayed on Daniel. Daniel looked down at his clean shirt, the warm food, the shoes that actually fit, and the hope he felt rising inside him, a feeling he thought he had lost forever. With a trembling voice he said, "I'm scared, but for the first time, I'm also hopeful." Manny nodded. "Hope is enough to start." A soft breeze passed through the street, carrying the sound of vendors, children, jeepneys, and conversations. Yet somehow, the world felt quieter, more peaceful. Daniel placed a hand over the money and whispered, "I won't waste this chance. I promise." Manny's eyes softened. "I didn't give you a chance," he said quietly. "You already had one. I just reminded you of it." For a long moment, they stood there. No cameras. No reporters. No speeches. Just a man rediscovering his worth. And another man reminding him of it. The assistant from the foundation stepped forward respectfully. "Daniel, whenever you're ready, we'll take you to the center. Fresh meals, a shower, a bed, and tomorrow we'll talk about work options." Daniel nodded, overwhelmed. I can't believe this is happening." Manny gave him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "Believe it. You're not alone anymore." The assistant waited patiently, and Daniel looked at Manny one last time, eyes shining. "I'll never forget what you did for me," he whispered. Manny's smile was small, but warm. "Don't remember me," he said softly. "Remember yourself. Remember what you're capable of." With that, Daniel was guided carefully toward the waiting car. The door closed gently behind him. The crowd remained still. No applause. No cheers. Just a deep, respectful silence, one that carried more emotion than noise ever could. Manny took a slow breath, glanced once toward the city he loved, then adjusted his simple jacket. He didn't wait for recognition. He didn't look for thanks. He didn't pose or wave. He simply turned and began walking down the street with quiet, steady steps. No fanfare. No spotlight. Just humility. A true champion leaving behind a moment that would be retold for generations. A moment not of power, but of kindness. A moment where a man asked for $2 and received back his dignity, his hope, and his life. Manny didn't look back. He didn't need to. His impact remained standing right there in the hearts of everyone watching. And as he disappeared into the crowd, one vendor whispered what everyone else was thinking. "Some heroes fight in the ring, but the greatest ones fight for people." Kindness is one of the rare things left in this world that costs nothing, yet can change absolutely everything. People often measure success by fame, money, or power. But real greatness, true greatness, is measured in the moments when no one is watching. When you choose to help someone who can't offer you anything in return. When you choose compassion over convenience. That morning on the streets of Manila, something incredible happened. Something more meaningful than a boxing title or a championship belt. A man who had once known hunger and struggle recognized that same pain in another human being. And instead of walking past it, he walked toward it. Manny Pacquiao didn't help Daniel to appear generous. He didn't do it for attention. He didn't do it to prove anything. He helped because he remembered. He remembered what it felt like to go to bed hungry. He remembered what it felt like to be ignored. He remembered what it felt like to be invisible. And that memory, that empathy, is what separates champions in the ring from champions in life. Most people think strength is measured by how hard you can hit. But the truth is, real strength is measured by how gently you can lift someone who has fallen. Strength is choosing kindness in a world where cruelty is easy. Strength is giving hope to someone who has forgotten how it feels. Every day, we pass by people who are fighting battles we know nothing about. A simple smile, a small act, a tiny moment of compassion can spark a change bigger than you can imagine. You never know, your kindness might be the only good thing someone experiences that day. Daniel didn't just receive money. He received dignity. He received a second chance. He received a reminder that he mattered. And isn't that what every human being deserves? To feel seen. To feel valued. To feel human. That's the real lesson here. Humanity isn't found in wealth or status. It's found in humility. It's found in the way you treat the person who has nothing to offer you. It's found in the quiet moments when you choose goodness simply because it's the right thing to do. If more people acted the way Manny did that day, the world wouldn't just be better, it would be transformed. One small act of kindness can echo through a person's entire life. One moment of compassion can rewrite someone's story. So remember this. Kindness isn't measured by the size of your wallet. It's measured by the size of your heart. You don't have to be rich to help someone. You don't have to be famous. You don't have to be powerful. All you need is the courage to care. And if this story touched you, even a little, then carry that feeling with you. Next time you see someone struggling, someone hurting, someone overlooked by the world, pause. Even if you can't give money, give something. A smile. A moment. A kind word. You never know how far it will go. Manny didn't transform Daniel's life with grand speeches or big announcements. He did it with kindness. Quiet, simple, genuine kindness. And maybe, just maybe, that's the greatest kind of power any of us can have. Now I want to ask you, do you believe humanity still exists? If you do, type kindness in the comments. Let the world see how many good hearts are still out there. And before you go, tell me where you're watching from. I'd love to thank you personally for being part of this story, for believing in goodness, and for reminding the world that compassion still matters. Because sometimes, one kind soul is enough to inspire 1,000 more.